Let's
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Ellie Hardy. I'm a second year architecture student, and this event is part of the Commonplace Beauty project. The project has been made possible with funding from TAP and the Arts and Humanities Knowledge Exchange at the University of Sheffield and Research England and Office for Students. We are incredibly grateful for their support, both financial and practical. The Commonplace Beauty project has been created by writer and artist Helen Angel, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about it now.
Thank you, Ellie, and thanks everyone. It's so lovely to see you again this week. I'm Helen Angel, and I'm a poet and non-fiction writer, but I've obviously got a huge passion for photography as well, which I use really strongly when I'm out searching for images and things to write about in my poetry, but it is a passion in itself. This project is supported by TAP, and I'm working with Ellie, who's a placement student from the programme, which has just been an absolute delight. Such a wonderful opportunity. And TAP is funded by Research England and Office for Students, as Ellie mentioned. My original aim for this project was to encourage people to look and find the beauty around us, especially in places where it might be very hidden, or places that would traditionally seem to be quite unbeautiful. And I wanted us to look at places with a real freshness, which was where the idea of look closely, look deeply, look with love came from. As well as this, my other intention, as Mark Wrigley, who's here, commented the other day, was the idea of the democratisation of art, making creativity open to everyone, and to have a creative space and create a community where it was incredibly inclusive, where there were experienced practitioners sitting alongside people who might never have photographed before, and where we were able to create an environment that was just really supportive for everyone. And that broader remit of knowledge exchange, not only between myself and Ellie, but also between the different contributors and people who were involved in the project as well. So you know, that continues to be a really big intention behind this, and it's been really lovely to see the number of people get so engaged in social media, particularly on Instagram, where people have started communication with each other, and to create an environment in which people are really supportive about one another's creations. So thank you all for being here. I know you're going to enjoy the event this evening, and with that I'm going to pass you back to Ellie.
Brilliant, thanks Helen. So just a little bit of housekeeping for this evening. It really matters to us that this is an inclusive space. Whilst we ask you to keep your microphones off during the talk, as long as the bandwidth holds out, please feel free to leave your cameras on. We are recording the event, and then the link will be up on our social media tomorrow if you'd like to see it. Please feel free to post any questions or issues in the chat function, and we're also checking our email during the event as well. When Helen was putting her ideas together for this project, she wanted to invite a photographer who understood the ethos behind it and whose work she admired, and we're really excited that Richard agreed to join us. Born in Birmingham, Richard Davis took up photography after leaving school in the early 1980s, a passion which has dominated his life ever since. Moving to the northwest of England at the end of the 80s, Richard has become known for his social documentary as well as his first love, portraiture. In more recent times, Richard has had his photography exhibited in London, Manchester and Berlin. His work has also been featured heavily online via the British Culture Archive, and he has several books recently published by respected photography publishers, Cafe Royal Books. Richard's going to speak for about 35 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes at the end for a Q&A. So we're really excited to start, and I'd like to welcome Richard Davis.
Well, thank you, Ellie, and obviously thank you, Helen, as well, for inviting me back for workshop 2. So let me just recap. Workshop 1 was all about my black and white photography from about 35 years ago in the Hume district of Manchester. And obviously it was all black and white because it was on taken on a 35mm SLR camera. And what's really good about tonight's is it's completely different to that, because it's using obviously different technology, but I've also decided to make all the 5 images I'm going to show tonight all colour. So in workshop 1, if you listen to it, I was taking inspiration from the black and white films of Jim Jarmusch and Wim Wenders. So workshop 2, I've decided to take all the 5 photos I've decided to show to you tonight has taken inspiration really from the colour films of Wes Anderson. I wanted to get that in really because of the film theme from workshop 1. Wes Anderson is someone who I adore, mainly for his composition, his colour, his symmetry, and his general strangeness of ordinary scenes, which I think really works out well with what Helen is doing with the Commonplace Beauty project. So tonight it's about Morecambe. We've moved from the inner city area of Hume and we're going to the coastal resort of Morecambe. What I really like about Morecambe is I've probably been photographing here for about 10 years now. And again, like Hume, actually, there's a real expanse, an open space to Morecambe. And what I've found is I've kind of like split Morecambe into 2, the way I approach it with my photography. And I think one half is out in Morecambe Bay, using the vast skies you get, incredible light, and obviously dealing with what happens, you know, with the tide in, tide out, and how it leaves the sand, or the channels, or the patterns, or the texture. And it's an ideal location really to photograph in, but it's totally natural. Now the other side to my Morecambe photos is completely man-made, and it's in the actual town and completely different to the Morecambe Bay, which is why I love really photographing in Morecambe, because there's such variety. So anyway, for tonight it's all about the town, and it's really interesting place to photograph in as well. It's kind of like what we would probably call now a faded coastal resort. Originally in the past, it was obviously quite wealthy and attracted lots and lots of people from the UK on their holidays. Really, especially along the front, you can still see the housing in Morecambe spectacular, because that obviously links to the past and its glory days. But what I love really, for my purposes now, I love that kind of like that faded beauty from the past now, and how the housing still is, but obviously it's very different to its heyday. But it makes a fascinating subject to photographing. Now, what's different as well about, like I said, about workshop 1 to workshop 2 is this is all in colour, and it's using digital technology, and really that opens up a lot more possibilities, and you've really just got more options. Now I could have a completely different workshop at some point down the line where you could talk about the merits of analog photography versus digital photography, and there's many pros and cons for both. And I know a lot of traditional photographers won't go anywhere near digital. I'm kind of like, I can see what they're on about, and it's very hard to get away from pure grain photography from an aesthetic point of view. But also I think digital has its merits as well, and it's certainly really ideal for what Helen's doing and the Commonplace Beauty, because the thing with digital photography is it's very accessible, very cheap, and you don't, in some ways, you don't have to understand photography and f-stops and shutter speeds and film speeds to get a decent photograph. And the other thing, obviously, digital can do is you can actually see what you photographed in the instant, and you can make corrections. And obviously that you can't do that on 35mm traditional photography. And the other obviously good thing is it's very instant, and you're not spending hours and hours in a dark room with chemicals like I used to 30 odd years ago. So there's no dark room. And in fact, the dark room is basically your phone or your laptop or your computer at home. And workshop 3 really is looking into what we can do once you've taken that photograph, and how we can alter the images via the new technology. So that will be workshop 3. So anyway, let's start workshop 2. So this is all about Morecambe. Okay, Ellie, could we have photo 1, please? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've gone now. This what's interesting about this, when I look at this, is really it's all about light, this workshop, and how light falls onto a subject. And because I'm using colour, I've noticed in most, I think virtually all the photos, the sun is out and there's quite a strong light. And I think because of that, it really gives a boost to the colours in the image. And if, I guess, it was overcast or the sun wasn't out, it would be it wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't look this vibrant. So if you notice, probably most of the images I'm going to show, the sun is out and it's a strong light. Now, obviously, the light can change depending on what time of the day it is. And also, obviously, if the sun is out, then there's shadow as well. But again, this is something that really comes in time when you delve into the world of photography. Over time, you get used to looking at how something can look in the morning, how something can look the same thing can look in midday, or the same thing can look at the end of the day. And really there's no right or wrong time to take a photograph. And in fact, what the beauty of digital, because of those the advantages I spoke about a few minutes ago, you can take so many images now on digital and delete ones you're not happy with, or return to the scene at another day, at another time. And in fact, I've started doing this a lot with my photography, where I use, as well as I've got a digital SLR camera, I've also got obviously my camera phone now. And in fact, one of the images I'll say is done on my iPhone camera. And a lot of the time now, I'm walking around Morecambe and I'm taking images with my phone for to study. When I get home, I will look at it on a computer, I'll study it. I will look at how light is falling, note what time of the day it is, note what time of the season it is, the weather conditions. And then if need be, obviously, I will go back at a future time with my digital SLR and do probably another version of it. So that's completely different to the old days with 35mm, but again, another benefit to digital, really. So with this Rita's Cafe, obviously I walk around Morecambe and I have favoured locations. And being the obsessive person I am now with photography, I've got quite a few notebooks at home, and I will jot down various things of locations, and I will return to these things at certain given times of the year, weather conditions, blah, blah, blah. Now, with Rita's Cafe, what's interesting is there's been many photos of this in Morecambe in the past, and a lot of it is done from the front, looking at people eating, sat at tables. But what I've always loved with Rita's Cafe is the side view. Go around the side, and that's something again I'll recommend to any of you. When you see something you like, a building, don't just view it in at the front or from a certain viewpoint. Walk round it, look at it in many different ways, and see, or even take many different photos of it from different angles, and then study it and then see what you prefer. Now, I know I'd had my eye on this shop for quite a while, and there'd always been cars in the way or people in the way, or the light wasn't right. And again, I think a lot of the time photography really is all about patience, and you have to be prepared to be patient. And I think I've got many photos of this, but this is my favorite one because I think it's so clean looking and the light is perfect, and it's really boosted the colors. But I also like the fact that there's no cars in it and there's no people in it, and it's kind of like give it more of that weird Wes Anderson look that I was talking about earlier. So I think that's something to bear in mind as well with when you do photography, is you do need patience, and don't give up. Don't give up if you don't get that right photo first time round. Right, okay, so should we go for image number 2, please, Ellie? Oh, yeah. One of the things that attracts me to Morecambe, obviously there's different areas to Morecambe, and one of the areas is called the West End. And I think it was kind of like where the big houses were in the past, in the tourist days, but now it's obviously fell into disrepair. But what I love about the West End is the certain streets where the windows are so chaotic, and it really appeals to me in terms of my photography. And I do a lot of black and white as well as colour in the West End, but I think it's the chaotic nature of the housing that really draws me in. But in this case, I've gone for colour, mainly because of the car and the slight red brick and the colour of the sky. And I've got the sun out, but it's not exactly blue sky. It's kind of like a little bit more menacing looking than the first photo, which is a clean blue. Now, for some reason, I'm a huge fan of the French photographer Raymond Depardon, who did a set of photos on Glasgow in 1980. And his use of colour in that project was absolutely outstanding. There was a subtleness to the colour. And I'm not saying this is anywhere near as good as those Glasgow photos, but in some way it reminds me of the subtle colours. And it's not as full on as the first photo in terms of the vibrancy, but it's caught a subtleness. And I think sometimes when you do go into colour photography, and again, I'll touch on this in workshop 3, you can play around a little bit and soften certain colours or highlight certain colours. So it gives you many options. But this is a really, I love the West End to photograph in. Like I said, mainly because it gives, you know, a different side to Morecambe than, say, the shops and the promenade and or I guess even the more upmarket end towards Bear. But I like the chaos of the West End, and really that's why I've included this photo. And also randomly the dustbins, I didn't throw them over, by the way. that was like that. And I did it. I remember thinking at the time, do I move them out the way, or do I even stand them up? And then I thought, no, actually, that is the West End. So I left them in. I think Martin Parr often says in his photos, he doesn't actually touch anything or alter anything. And I think sometimes, I think that's a good thing to bear in mind. As long as nothing is too distracting. I think what quite often, sometimes what photographers say when you think about composition, this is like the first photo, actually, these two, the first two, the compositions, there's a lot going on, but actually the eyes leading into the photo, there's nothing too distracting around the edges, although there's so much going on. And I think if you want to know, when I say something's distracting, I think if it tends to be more in the middle of a photo, when the eye's leading into it, it's not so much of an issue. I think when something is towards the edges of a photo and it's clearly drawing the eye away from the middle, then that maybe sometimes is an issue for you to look at and maybe try and alter. But I would say, again, like the first one, I'm really happy with the composition on that. Right, okay, let's move to photo 3. Right, yes, the garages. Now, this was done on my camera phone. So it just shows you now what you can do with the technology, and everybody really, if you remember from workshop 1, when I was saying 30 odd years ago, there weren't many people around with a camera, which obviously was a good thing for me and Hume, because there weren't many people who documented that area. Whereas now it's completely different, obviously good and bad, but in a good way. We can all be photographers now. There's nothing to stop us. And this is what's great, obviously, with the project of Commonplace Beauty. We can all go out there, we can all take in our surroundings and document them. And this is what happened to me. This is only actually about a month old, this photo. And I was out in Morecambe, and I'd never come across this area before. And I turned a corner, and it was like being hit by a brick in the face. It was that jaw-dropping. I know I was lucky. The light was perfect, and it really emphasized the colors and the sky with the cloud and the blue, and obviously the foreground with the tarmac and the lines. It's such a simple image, but it was just, I knew instantly it was wow. And what's great about this, I showed it someone the next day who lives near these garages, and he apparently, I showed him this photo, and he didn't know where it was. And again, I said, look closely. He still didn't know. And I said, look, it's in Morecambe. And then I said, it's where do you live? And I said, right, it's at the end of your road. And then he looked at it again, and he said, oh my God, I walk past that every day. Now, that straight away, that told me something, that person is walking around and not really taking in his surroundings, and he's missing out. I'm sure he might not see it that way, but that's how I viewed it. And again, it really goes to the heart of what Helen is doing with Commonplace Beauty, and how really we shouldn't really go around with our heads down or not taking things in, because you'd be amazed if you do start slowing down and looking up and looking around you and looking at how light falls on things. You'll be amazed that actually those simple everyday things can all of a sudden, via photography, look completely different. And again, I would say there's a definite Wes Anderson feel to this photo, and it's just, a garage lockup in Morecambe. Right, okay, let's move on to image number 4, please. The headless ice cream vendor. Well, I had to get Morecambe Bay in, sort of. But I still wanted it part of Helen's project about Morecambe Town rather than the Bay. And so what better thing to put in than an ice cream van? But this is obviously this is no ordinary ice cream van. I mean, look at the wheels. They are superb. Now, what's good about this is the light. The light is like a diffused light here. But it's kind of like made it, really. I mean, look at the colour of the sky, the colour of the bay, the colour of the sand, and then obviously the colour of the red stripe. But I think ultimately what I love on this is the figure in the van and the fact you can't see his head. Now, following on from workshop 1 with the 3 images of Hume and the lack of people in them, and then when I was looking at the Morecambe photos to make the selection for this workshop 2, I realized this is my style of photography. And I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing with me personally. I think maybe I am a little bit probably, maybe I don't like people. I don't know. But it kind of like suits my photography, I guess. This kind of expanse, strange environment. Not a lot of people in these scenes. What does that say about me? I don't know. I don't know. But this makes me laugh. And I think that's another good thing with our photography to bear in mind. Sometimes photography, at times when you're photographing ordinary things, it's great if those ordinary things can make you laugh. I think you're on the right track if that happens. And I think that's a good thing to bear in mind as well, to enjoy photography. And I think if you enjoy it, I think you'll take better photographs. Right, so what I also wanted to say really about this workshop is really what I was saying earlier about, really it's all about light, isn't it? And times of the day, and also bear in mind the differences of the seasons and what that can mean in terms of how light falls. And also I guess with color photography, it's whether you've heard of that phrase, the golden hour, which is like the how the light behaves prior to sunset. That's also an interesting time to get used to photographing in, as is the sunrise and early morning. So it's worth, when I spoke earlier about with digital, because of the cost aspect, and also you can delete so much, it's worth experimenting. And it's worth experimenting with what you're photographing in the times of the day. It's also worth looking in terms of how you compose a photograph and how you decide. Look, and the beauty of digital again is you can take a photograph and then look at it in the moment, and then decide, do I need to alter my position? Do I need to alter the height aspect? Do I need to get closer? Do I need to step back? I think a lot of the time, again, with my style of photography is mostly shot with a wide angled lens. And I think, again, it taps into the open spaces and the vastness. And again, like Hume with the housing estate and the big brutalist architecture. The coastal resort of Morecambe is great for a wide angled lens because there's such, with Morecambe Bay and the big skies, it gives a vastness. And I think again, that suits my photography. But what's good with digital, like I said, you can look at what you're doing at the time. And I said, and also, you know, don't be afraid to take a variety of photographs of the same subject matter. And then again, when you're at home, when you've got time, when you're looking on a laptop or a computer, look at which is the best, look at which one you're happy with. And sometimes you find it's really the minute detail of change from a set of the same subject matter. You know, you'll be amazed at how different they are when you look at them in a minute way, and then you can choose which one you're happiest with. Right, okay, let's move on please to the last image. What's good with Morecambe is, and very different to Manchester, is Manchester constantly seems to evolve or change, or there's new buildings and new areas cropping up and things change all the time, which is great, you know. But also there's another side, and the side to Morecambe is there's not a lot of change. And the beauty of that is you've still got quite a lot of old buildings left scattered around the resort that probably haven't changed since the 1960s or 70s. And sometimes really, I love that for photography. I mean, you will get, because sometimes you get a block of shop fronts. Some are modern, some are new, and then next door can be really, really old, decades old, and the fonts will be weird. And there's a real mixture of different styles. And I think I've always loved this building in Morecambe. It's like a garage, and it is probably been like this for a long time. And again, this is another one where I photographed this many times and in many different conditions. And again, this was really lucky. It was quite early in the morning, I think around about 10 o'clock. I think it was on a Saturday morning. And I was lucky in the sense, again, most days there's people passing here, or the garage doors are open and there's more clutter. And I was pretty lucky here that Saturday morning as I went past, because there was a unusual blue sky. The light was shining at the right angle onto it. The garage hadn't got open by this time, and there was nobody really about, and there was no cars too much in the foreground. And there's a little bit of shadow with the tree. And again, so what, you know, talking about before when I said about biding your time, and sometimes it pays to return to the scene of the crime at a later date and reshoot what you've already got, because each day is different. I remember always thinking, I normally think this, Morecambe Bay is a fascinating one, not the town, Morecambe Bay. And someone once asked me, you must have hundreds of photos now out in Morecambe Bay, and I have. But then I said to him, look, each day is different. Each day is different. And even photographing the same strip of the bay, it's always different, whether the tide's in or the tide's out, or whether the sun's out, the sun's in, whether the rain's there or whether it's overcast, whether it's summer, whether it's winter, whether the wind is pretty ferocious or whether it's calm. What happens in Morecambe Bay is, because obviously twice a day the tide comes in, it changes the sand, and the patterns you see on that sand are completely always different each day. And it's only when you look closely at things that you realize just how much difference things get each day, and really not to take for granted something that maybe you've already photographed, or an area you've already walked down, or a street you've already walked down maybe hundreds of times. There will always be something different. And as I've said, I realize I am very obsessive in my photography, but I think you have to be, really, to really look closely at things. And I get upset sometimes when I realize I miss things, or certain things aren't right, and it's not always possible to go back and capture what you originally saw. However, having the iPhone on me now, it's really given me the excuse now, because there's probably never ever a time now that I haven't got a camera on me when I'm going about my business, or going I'm at work, or going down the shops. So in some ways it's great, really, because I don't always, in the past obviously I would never ever I didn't always carry my SLR 35mm with me all the time. I did a lot of the time, but not all the time. And inevitably, when you didn't have the thing, you would see something. Right, where are we? Where are we up to? We're about, what time are we? About 7:10. I can't hear you, Helen. You've been muted.
Yeah. So
good.
Yeah,
Good.
well, if you this was your last one, so
It was. Do you want to maybe
go?
go to questions and answers?
I think that's a wonderful idea. So I haven't accessed these ones in chat yet. Ellie, I don't know if you've managed to get those out of there. I'll just start you off with one or two things maybe that I thought of as we were going through. So you talked about time of day.
Yeah.
And particular times of day, but do you have a particular season or time of year that you prefer to shoot photographs in?
Oh yeah. Actually, each season has its merits for different reasons, obviously. Probably most of the photos I've spoke about tonight have obviously really been in the summer months, or the sunnier months. And actually, my favorite season is probably autumn. And I tell you, my best weather condition to photograph in is fog and mist. Not only in for housing and the streets, and especially for black and white, but actually also really subtle colours in mist and fog, because obviously mist and fog turns everything almost like a ghostly grey. But if you alter in work, as I'm talking about in workshop 3, where we're looking at post-production, if you subtly alter certain colours with mist and fog, oh, it's crazy. You can get the most ghostly images. Morecambe Bay is superb in mist, and very haunting. And there's almost a nothingness, and sometimes I really love that in my photography. Dare I say it, why I've really loved Mark Rothko's paintings. Sometimes there's a complete nothingness, and in mist and fog there's nothing better than nothingness, apart from, say, an odd plant or a branch or a little bit of a tree looking in a distance, or a figure walking on Morecambe Bay beach in the distance. So I would have to say, and obviously snow is unbelievable, but we just don't get enough of it here. But I would say mist and fog is a beautiful condition season to photograph in. But again, we don't get a lot of it. So obviously, you know, I always feel genuine joy when I have the time and it coincides with, say, a misty or foggy morning.
Lovely. Okay, I've just got these chat questions up now. This is from Stuart Case. Would just like to know if Richard thinks differently when shooting black and white to colour. Is there a different mindset?
Very much so. But you know, Stuart, what's really good now, obviously with digital, everything you photograph on digital, one of the main merits of it is you've got a choice of colour and black and white. You can try out again at home. Right, the rule is keep your original. Always keep your original version of what you've photographed, and from that make copies, and make a copy in black and white, and make a copy in, say, altered color. And you've always got options. I didn't have that, if you remember, Stuart, in the 30 years ago in Hume, because I chose to go down the black and white route. And obviously with grain and high contrast, and kind of like what I was photographing, it did work really well for that kind of photography, that harshness, that the grain and the lack of the joke is, in my Hume photos there was no bloody sunlight, whereas workshop 2 in Morecambe, the sun is out, everything is wonderful, it's beautiful, look at the colors. So that appeals to me, really, that workshop 1 and 2 are so radically different. So with color, I am approaching things differently and looking at how colors hit it off with each other, the reds, the blues, the whites, especially when the sun is on them. And as I've said, I think that probably is because I've watched too many Wes Anderson films.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is more a technical question from Martin Dust. What's your favourite film to work with? Oh,
we're talking in the olden days.
I think that's what Martin will mean. Yeah.
I tended to shoot with HP5, Ilford HP5, because it was a 400 ASA film speed, and it gave me a little bit more light, so I could have a better aperture, f-stop, better depth of field. However, when I was at Manchester Poly, and obviously money was tight, and I was using the laboratories on my course, there was a black and white film that you could put through a C41 process, and I tended to use that. It's like Ilford XP2, was it XP2 or XP1? What was it? I can't remember. God, it was so long ago. But it went through a C41 process, but it did give you a different feel. The grain, it was slightly different. So I tended to prefer Ilford's HP5. Although when I did know the lighting was really, really good, I would go for an FP4. God, that's a very technical question. I'm sure a lot of people with digital cameras with an interest in photography in the last few years would have had no idea what I was talking about. So apologies.
Okay, so this is from Kevin Fowler. Do you shoot with the camera on a tripod or handheld?
Sorry, Helen, you froze a little bit then. Could you just repeat that?
Yeah. Do you shoot with a camera on a tripod or handheld?
handheld. Occasionally I've done tripods. Obviously I've done tripods sometimes when I more experimental stuff and you know, self-portrait stuff and weirder stuff. But most of what I do is handheld, because I like to be able to move around. And like I said, what I was talking before about angles and moving up, moving down, moving slightly to the side, because I think the other thing to bear in mind in photography is about lines. And you know, I was talking about last week about how most of what I photograph really is about lines, patterns, and how images on the composition draws the eye in. And I think when you're on a tripod, you're a little bit limited really with moving, and if all of a sudden you're looking at something and you've set something up and you realize a line's crooked, or a line's a little bit distracting or disjointed, you can't really alter that much. Whereas if you're handheld, you've got more freedom. And I guess if the lighting condition's good, and in most cases in these 5 images the light is great, there was no worry really about the shutter speed. Obviously most people use tripods if the light is so low level at night, or sunrise, sunset, or you know, you're trying to capture certain things really in focus and doing long shutter speeds. So in this case of what I do, I normally don't really need that in my style of photography. But I guess if I was shooting all this at night, then obviously everything would have to be done by tripod.
Okay, thank you. This is from Nirvana, who I recognise from Instagram. Were you always drawn to a particular style, or did you try out different things and see what you were most comfortable with or best at?
When I first started, I did mainly portraiture, and I did a lot of, I suppose, music photography, gig photography. Then I got into doing band portraits, as well as doing, I don't know what to call it really, because there's obviously street photography, and then there's documentary photography and social photography. And I think most people over the years have tended to lump me in with social or documentary photography. I'm quite happy with that. I realise I occasionally do street photography, but I guess I feel a little bit out of my comfort zone a little bit more with street photography, although I can appreciate other photographers for doing it. And like I was talking, when you look at my work and you know, for this project, it's been useful because quite often my best photograph is always my latest one, and I don't tend to dwell on what I've done 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago. But because of this project, I have tried to look at a few things and try and work out, well, how, you know, what am I going to talk about and what am I going to do. And I realise the wide-angled lens is probably a critical thing with my photographs, and open spaces and use of sky and as I've said, I've noticed, I didn't really realise it as how there's not many people in my photographs actually, in a lot of the street photographs I do. I'm not always aware of, I don't mean to do that, but I think it's not natural instinct, my style. And I guess because I've been photographing for probably 40 years, most of it's by instinct, and I don't think too much, oh, this has got to be, I've got to do it like this way because it's my style. I think it just comes naturally to me, and I know what I like and what I don't like. And also I do have, you know, photographers I really like, and depending on color or black and white or portraiture or documentary work or what, and I take from certain things, but as I've said before, I also take a lot, probably a lot, just as much from film and film directors and how they use composition. I tell you, a color photographer I really love in the last few years, Soul Lighter. His use of color is staggering, and obviously since Cindy Sherman as well, how she uses color. Ernst Haas as well, how he uses color. So I do look at other photographers and what they do and take inspiration from it, but ultimately as well, I'm aware I've probably got my own thing now without even thinking too much about it. And I don't even know I'm doing it half the time.
I'll just take you back to a question. Just, I mean, you have touched on this. This is from Jonathan Roby, who says, what is your favourite time of day to take pics?
Sunrise, because there's nobody about.
But there's such an irony about that, because I mean, we obviously, this project's all about placemaking, but your portraits are as famous as the Hume.
Yeah,
So there's a kind of there's a strange.
I know, but I do, like I said, I do view the portraiture differently, and I, you know, obviously, I love photographing people. I mean, I don't, oh God, I don't want to sound like I'm antisocial or anything. I'm not, far from it. But I think for my other work in terms of photography, especially Morecambe in a way, but also, as like I said, it was in Hume as well. I loved early mornings, mainly because nobody hassled me or asked what I was doing, or and I love the light in sunrise and the length of the shadows you can sometimes get, and the subtle colors. Now, obviously most people photograph at sunset, especially in Morecambe, so I do my hardest to try and avoid that.
Excellent. Right, this is the last question from here, but I've probably got, if we've got time, there might be a couple of other things that I've written down as well. So this is from Maddie Sheldon, and she said, Maddie, what's your favourite Wes Anderson film?
I've got so many, but I love all of them. I think Grand Budapest Hotel, just because of Ralph Fiennes and his character. It's just so bizarre, but I've seen it so many times, that film, and yet I always laugh with it. I just, oh, what a character, what an actor. I love that. What else is available? Oh God, they're all good, aren't they? I mean, they're all so different as well. The first one, Bottleneck, wasn't it? The first one. It was only his first film, done on a really low budget, and I think it's just outstanding. I just find I love his humour, but obviously I love his colour and composition and symmetry. I love all of his films. It's like you can't pick a favourite, but if I have to pick a favourite, it's Ralph Fiennes in Grand Budapest Hotel.
Okay, now this is from your pal Pete Moser.
Hello, Pete.
And I think the question is, do you ever think of the music to connect with any image?
Well, I used to do do a couple of, I did a series of short films about 10 years ago. And I used to do, sometimes we used to do films of my photography as well. And it was great picking a soundtrack. And I also love using friends or local artists as well. But I remember I did a film with my Hume photos, and I used a Leonard Cohen song, sorry. And it was an instrumental. It's an obscure one. And it was so haunting. But my favourite person was Teresa Standish, who is no longer with us. She was a Morecambe resident, and she played the cello and the violin. And she did quite a lot of music to my photography in the past, and she always, haunting. I would have to say Teresa Standish. She's God, don't get me going because I'll get upset.
Okay, thank you so much. Right, I'm going to pass back to Ellie to conclude the evening.
Yeah, thank you everyone. We hope you've had a nice evening. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. An enormous thanks to Richard again for such an inspirational talk, and Helen for planning this event. It couldn't happen without her. And then also Zelda for the tech support yet again. We'd love to see you all again next week for Richard's third and final workshop, Post-Production, A Photographer's Craft. And finally, if you have any feedback for us, that would be brilliant. Please leave it in the chat. We'd really appreciate it. Best wishes to everyone. We hope you have a lovely week, and continue to look closely, look deeply, and look with love. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.